Hey guys, it's Daniel, licensed therapist. When it comes to happiness, we all know the secret. Tell him, Conan.
Conan, what is best in life? To crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentation of their women. That
If you're hesitant to take happiness secrets from a barbarian, well, you might be doing something right. But what is the secret to happiness? Is it money? Is it power? Is it fame? Is it sex? And who should we listen to? Should we listen to the celebrities, the influencers, the philosophers, the religious leaders? Well, if you ask me, I think we should listen to the researchers, the scientists, psychologists, and the psychiatrists. So there's this little college in Boston called Harvard, and they're doing this amazing study called the Adult Development Study. And this just isn't any study because there's some really bad studies out there. I mean, look at this ridiculous study from Change Research on red flags in a partner. Red flags include identifying as a conservative, identifying as a liberal, and doesn't care about politics. I mean, doesn't that just cover everyone? So does that mean everyone has a red flag? So this study contradicts itself, but what does the study really tell us? Nothing. It doesn't really say anything. So there are bad studies out there, but this study that Harvard is doing is not that. This thing is meaty and robust and has come out with a lot of data. So let's see. It started in 1983 and it followed 726 participants. And these researchers, they interviewed them, they visited them, they had them fill out questionnaires, and they also got a lot of data on their physical health and well-being. And you know what, guys? It is still going on today, 85 years strong. That is impressive. You know, this research actually reminds me of John Gottman's research. He's a psychologist up at the University of Washington, and he has devoted his life to studying couples and romantic relationships. And what he did was he got these apartments and he had couples live in these apartments and he measured everything. And what happened was he came out with a bunch of data and metrics on what relationships look like. And this data has laid the groundwork for relationship research and relationship theories and treatment for marriages and couples. This research at Harvard reminds me of that. So Robert Waldinger is the head of this research at Harvard, and fortunately for us, he made a TED Talk on it. So we don't have to read it. We can just watch it and react to it. So what is the secret to happiness? Let's find out.
Well, the lessons aren't about wealth or fame or working harder and harder. The clearest message that we get from this 75-year study is this: good relationships keep us happier and healthier, period. We've learned three big lessons about relationships. The first is that social connections are really good for us and that loneliness kills. It turns out that people who are more socially connected to family, to friends, to community are happier, they're physically healthier, and they live longer than people who are less well connected. And the experience of loneliness turns out to be toxic. People who are more isolated than they want to be from others find that they are less happy, their health declines earlier in midlife, their brain functioning declines sooner, and they live shorter lives than people who are not lonely. And the sad fact is that at any given time, more than 1 in 5 Americans will report that they're lonely.
So there it is. If you've watched this channel at all, you know that I love relationships. I love reacting to relationship advice because some of it is so bad, and I feel like it's partly my job to help people out there engage in good, meaningful, and successful relationships. And now you know why. It's relationships that are the key to happiness. And I agree with Dr. Waldinger here. I feel like people are just lonely, and loneliness is so bad for you. In fact, I feel like loneliness is an epidemic out there. I feel like we're the loneliest generation, the loneliest people that have ever existed in human history. And you guys know the typical culprits: the social media, the rat race, keeping up with the Joneses, materialism, mental health struggles, among other things. So I guess the big takeaway from this first clip, and I would say from this whole video, is that we have to prioritize relationships. We have to know and understand that these are the most important things in our lives and that we have to really put an emphasis on them. So, pretty cool thing to take away from this video. Let's move on.
And we know that you can be lonely in a crowd and you can be lonely in a marriage. So the second big lesson that we learned is that it's not just the number of friends you have, and it's not whether or not you're in a committed relationship, but it's the quality of your close relationships that matters. It turns out that living in the midst of conflict is really bad for our health. High conflict marriages, for example, without much affection, turn out to be very bad for our health, perhaps worse than getting divorced. And living in the midst of good, warm relationships is protective. Once we had followed our men all the way into their 80s, we wanted to look back at them at midlife and to see if we could predict who was going to grow into a happy, healthy octogenarian and who wasn't. And when we gathered together everything we knew about them at age 50, it wasn't their middle-aged cholesterol levels that predicted how they were going to grow old. It was how satisfied they were in their relationships. The people who were the most satisfied in their relationships at age 50 were the healthiest at age 80. And good, close relationships seem to buffer us from some of the slings and arrows of getting old. Our most happily partnered men and women reported in their 80s that on the days when they had more physical pain, their moods stayed just as happy. But the people who were in unhappy relationships, on the days when they reported more physical pain, it was magnified by more emotional pain.
So Dr. Waldinger, he comes and talks about conflictual relationships that are bad and being in a relationship with a person who's warm, which is good, which I agree with all those things, but knowing and understanding what a good relationship is and how to engage in one is really complicated. There's a lot of different metrics and things that we need to look at in order to know what a good relationship is. So I wouldn't just take those two things and run with it. But what I feel like Dr. Waldinger is saying is you need to be proficient at relationships. Number one, you need to prioritize them. And number two, you need to be good at them. And I wouldn't say that being good at relationships is a given. I look at it as a skill. Some people just automatically are good at them. But if you're not, you can work at that. And I believe everybody has the capacity to be good at relationships. So if you're not, just work at it. Get good at relationships. And another big takeaway from what Dr. Waldinger said here is the connection between emotional health and physical health. I think it's kind of intuitive, and you guys probably already made that connection, but I feel like this study has really solidified that. And you know what? When you're young, hey, you can do anything. I remember I used to stay out all night and I felt fine the next day. If I stay up late, I'm wrecked the next day. So it catches up with you. And I feel like emphasis on good relationships later in life will definitely help you in your physical health. So something to keep note.
And the third big lesson that we learn about relationships and our health is that good relationships don't just protect our bodies, they protect our brains. It turns out that being in a securely attached relationship to another person in your 80s is protective. That the people who are in relationships where they really feel they can count on the other person in times of need, those people's memories stay sharper longer. And the people in relationships where they feel they really can't count on the other one, those are the people who experience earlier memory decline. And those good relationships, they don't have to be smooth all the time. Some of our octogenarian couples could bicker with each other day in and day out. But as long as they felt that they could really count on the other when the going got tough, those arguments didn't take a toll on their memories.
Wow, isn't that crazy? So if you want to stave off memory loss, Alzheimer's, and dementia, just have good relationships.
This message that Good, close relationships are good for our health and well-being. This is wisdom that's as old as the hills. Why is this so hard to get and so easy to ignore? Well, we're human. What we'd really like is a quick fix, something we can get that'll make our lives good and keep them that way. Relationships are messy and they're complicated, and the hard work of tending to family and friends, that's not sexy or glamorous. It's also lifelong. It never ends. The people in our 75-year study who were the happiest in retirement were the people who had actively worked to replace workmates with new playmates. Just like the millennials in that recent survey, many of our men, when they were starting out as young adults, really believed that fame and wealth and high achievement were what they needed to go after to have a good life. But over and over these 75 years, our study has shown that the people who fared the best were the people who leaned into relationships with family, with friends, with community.
Yes, we're human, and we do want that quick fix, but in my estimation, I think that marriages and relationships are under attack. I think they get a bad rep and they're looked at in a negative light. Have you heard it before? Marriages are so tough. I am so miserable in my marriage. And that can be true, but it can dissuade people from getting married. And I think the data shows that. There are less people married today than ever before. And Dr. Waldinger is right that relationships are messy and there are difficult aspects to relationships. But if you look at relationships like that, then why would you even want one? We have to look at relationships as, yes, messy. There are some things that we need to take care of. It is work. But by far, they are the most amazing things. They are going to be why we are happy in life. We also get a lot of messages from the world. The world sends us so many messages about what we need to be happy. Money, power, fame, status, a Bugatti. And those are not the things that are going to make you happy, according to this research and according to me. But you know what? It's kind of cheap coming from someone who doesn't have money, power, status, or a Bugatti in my garage. But let's hear from a billionaire.
Do you ever regret working so much? Like, was it worth it?
My first marriage fell apart. What I was left with is that I have 3 beautiful children, and my time with my family was the most important thing in the world to me. Way more important than any money. After my divorce, I would have given everything away because I can always make money, but you can't get back time with people. Certain things have permanent, lasting consequences, you know. So, yeah, I do regret working so hard.
So I always thought that that clip was pretty powerful. But you know what? I think there's a lot of people out there that would say, I'll still take it. I'll still want to be a billionaire. And you know what? You're an adult. You can make your own decision in life, but I would just advise you to think about it, because there are people at the end of life and they regret that decision. And the thing about time is it's that one resource that everyone is limited to. And when we spend it, it's gone. I would advise investing your resources into relationships, making them so fulfilling, and then you'll be happy. But if you don't want to do that, that's up to you. You can be like Conan and chase all those other things. But you can't say that Harvard and this guy didn't warn you first. Thanks for watching, you guys. I'll see you next time.